Today, I'm going to make an oil painting of some clustered woodlover mushrooms on a little clayboard panel. And while I do that, I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to talk to you about the ways that we can learn from mushrooms and mycelium to figure out how we want to show up for ourselves and others through difficult times. And then next, I am going to give you some creative prompts for comfort, because if you're anything like me, you need to be focused on comfort and finding solidarity with others as we go through the struggles of the next half decade. So let's get into it. I loved this little cluster. If you've ever seen mushrooms on a hike or on a walk, what you see are these things called fruiting bodies. The particular fruiting bodies that you see here are sulfur tufts, but they are also called clustered woodlovers. In order to notice mushrooms, I like to follow hikes that are out and backs rather than loops, where I can see the same patch of forest floor twice. These mushrooms' fruiting bodies have some beautiful lessons to consider about community, persistence, and communication that will be incredibly important for us to consider in the coming half decade or longer. These fruiting bodies are part of a much larger webbed network living within the soil called mycelium. The community of the mushroom exists primarily underground, but a few will pop forward as these fruiting bodies. These fruiting bodies give an opportunity for the mushroom to spread spores and increase the strength of the larger underground system. As I go into 2025 as a public-facing queer non-binary person, I am trying to fill myself with more hope than fear, despite the challenges of it. I feel like it is very important for me to be a fruiting body. Many of you who are watching this might be queer, trans, or non-binary like me. You might be a woman worried about your reproductive rights. You might be just a concerned citizen seeing everything going on right now and being freaked out. Again, I just brought up something pretty triggering, so take a deep breath. If you're sitting on the couch right now, stand up, put your feet on the ground, and breathe. Whatever you are feeling right now, it is likely that you relate to either being a fruiting body, someone who wants to be very present and puff up your chest, ready to continue sharing your story and growing the network that is rooted in underground. Or maybe you're in a place of feeling afraid, feeling like pulling back and sinking into your more intimate communities offline. Maybe that means you're a mycelium. In one of my favorite books, Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree, the author discusses various principles for movements. And my favorite lesson from there is that small is good, small is all. I love photographing mushrooms because they're so tiny, and for the most part, these fruiting bodies last 1 to 2 weeks depending on how wet or dry the season is. They will pop up, have a peak moment, and then wither away and decompose. When Adrienne Maree talks about mycelium in Emergent Strategy, she mentions that mycelium is the part of the fungus that grows underground in thread-like formations. If you've never seen this before, it's really cool. It's also how many plants communicate. It connects roots to one another, and it breaks down plant material to create healthier ecosystems. Mycelium is the largest organism on Earth, even though we can't see it. The mycelium allows us to be interconnected, to help fix the soil, and to detoxify. When we think about where we want to be and how we want to move through the next couple of years, it's going to be really crucial for us to think about the ways in which we can be like a mushroom. As we move forward with whatever pace resonates with us right now, we should really consider how we want to show up. We need to focus on ways that we can be interdependent with one another. We need to focus on ways that we aren't alone. Our culture teaches us that we are simply individuals, that we need to focus on individual growth, individual prestige, individual pursuits, that we should be focused on getting, 2.5 kids and a house in the suburbs with a white picket fence. But the further I get into my adult life, the more that I realize the American dream is more accessible, focusing on building robust communities. These communities you probably already have access to. There are so many people all around you that love you, that care for you, And despite the scariness that we are going into, reaching out to those people and having long, meandering phone conversations is probably one of the best things that you can do to support yourself at this moment. Despite the focus in our culture on the individual, we are incredibly interdependent, and mushrooms can teach us so much about this. When we think about the fact that these are just one fruiting body of a larger organism that we can't see that's underground, that's a beautiful place to take lessons right now if you're feeling freaked out by the rise of fascism in the United States. I'm going to call it exactly what it is. It's fascism. I am second generation from Poland, and if you know much about Polish history, you know that this is not new for us. Adapting to and fighting against fascism is something that my ancestors have done for years. We need to focus on ways to be mutually reliant on one another, to seek out opportunities for us to help one another. I recently made the choice to completely leave Instagram. This past week, there was a boycott called for to leave Instagram because of their new content moderation policies. And I did it. And in that week, I was more creative than I had been in a very long time. And I'm planning to leave the platform completely. If this is something that intrigues you, leave me a comment down below and let me know what your struggles or hangups might be with leaving. I'm planning another video that'll come out early next month that will go into detail about my plan, my experiences with, and how to help you leave too. The other thing that I love about mushrooms is because they are part of this larger underground mycelium, they are decentralized. Right now, when we think about social media platforms like Instagram or TikTok, so often those platforms are dependent on it continuing to exist on the servers that are held by those companies. All of our connections are centralized by for-profit companies that are holding the reins and setting the rules in which we can engage with and build community with one another. And quite frankly, if the TikTok ban and Meta's new policies have taught me anything, it's the importance of us finding new ways to join more decentralized networks, to become more like mycelium, to become like mushrooms. We focus so much in our culture about prestige and competition, and more often than not, we can get more done when we collaborate rather than compete. We don't need to constantly push ourselves to outsmart one another or be better than one another. We should be asking ourselves at this time, how can we do our best to serve the needs of those around us and those in our community? As things get tougher and scarier, which they will, hold your friends and your neighbors tightly. Be sure to hold space for the big emotions that are going to come up. And recognize the fact that the quality of life you have now and moving forward is going to be directly tied to authentic and generous connections that you make with others. You have to choose if you want to be someone who's a fruiting body, who's willing to stick their neck out and be seen at this time, or choose to be someone who's part of the mycelium, who's organizing in Discord servers, who is leading in-person events or virtual events on Zoom, to really try and organize people around the guiding principles that align with your values. Don't be afraid to ask people for help. Don't be afraid to ask people to connect with you in ways that are more authentic, honest, and real. Don't be afraid to ask for people's phone numbers or emails or even addresses. Don't you love to get mail? Become pen pals with people. Remember, there are so many systems that we already have in place that allow us to have, cultivate, and deepen the connections that we've been able to create on platforms like Instagram. So if you're feeling burnt out or you want to leave, there is still hope to connect with others. Ask yourself, if you are often cooking and have a lot of leftovers, if you can invite friends to join with you at your table for a meal. If you're someone who has a little bit more left over than you need, can you start to reinvest that money into mutual aid? If you don't have money to invest, do you have time that you can commit to showing up in specific communities? Are there things that you can do right now to help expand what you feel like is your own sense of interdependence. I think it's very hard right now. Everything will feel scary, but that is okay because we have one another. I believe that there are deep things that we can do to comfort one another and hold space as we navigate these increasing difficulties. I'm going to end the video with some creative prompts for comfort that I shared over on SUBSTACK earlier this month in order to inspire you to think about ways to comfort yourself, self-regulate, and find comfort in community. So here are those creative prompts that I mentioned. As I get into them, take one more deep breath and feel your body. Okay, so I'm going to start with journaling prompts. The first thing I want you to consider are, what are the shows, movies, books, podcasts, songs, and other art forms that you return to when things just feel bad? What draws you to them? Think back to the things that got you through the early pandemic. Are there particular practices for moving your body or getting out in nature that feel resonant, hopeful, and easily accessible to you now? This could be a simple walk around your block, a hike around a frozen lake nearby, or just lying on the floor in your living room to ground yourself in the present moment. Return to the goals and intentions you wrote a few years ago. Take comfort in reflecting on how you completed some of those goals by writing compassionately about how you got here. If you notice goals or ideas that now feel unaligned or that you outgrew, focus on compassion for yourself and write about the ways you have changed. Next, make a list of different meals, community members, practices, or other resources you have access to that bring you comfort in hard times. Then, make a list of your favorite materials for creativity and write down why you gravitate towards them. Focusing on what brings us joy when using certain art supplies or instruments can be critical for picking those up instead of scrolling. And lastly, make one final list of 5 things you can do to bring yourself comfort in times of uncertainty. And lastly, creative prompts on finding comfort. If you're someone who plays music like me, write down chord progressions or patterns in your favorite songs, and then practice those regularly, with time completely away from the screen. Having those on paper is really important. Play with diverting from the original, shift the instruments in unexpected ways, and try new tunings or effects. I recommend locating 4 or 5 different songs to do this with. Maybe these are songs that you wrote down earlier in the other journaling prompt. If there are particular songs that make you sad, like with me, it's always Phoebe Bridgers, take note of the patterns that those have and similarities as you study them. Use the opportunity to allow the music to flow through your body and feel those big emotions. Make a database or spreadsheet to record your feelings if that sounds fun to you. The next creative prompt I have for you is that comfort can be a beautiful place to study. Make studies of the colors, drawings, and shapes in your favorite works of art. Consider how the paint is applied and what surfaces are made out of. Find out what happens when you try to recreate it. You may discover new techniques that you want to incorporate here. The next prompt is to consider your favorite trees, plants, rocks, or other parts of nature that you encounter regularly. What makes you stop and return to them? Is it their size, their shape, the warmth of their bark on a cold day, the lichen coating every single edge that reminds you that the air is clean and safe here? Sketch, paint, or write about these elements that stick out to you. Maybe if you work with clay, you can try to sculpt them. My next creative prompt for you is to explore materials in your existing supply that bring you tactile comfort. One of my favorite things about knitting is picking out yarns with squishy bounce to them and holding them while knitting each project. You might feel this way about a specific paper, brush, instrument, or even the shoes you wear to walk in the woods. Focus on the feel of each item as you use it. And finally, make drawings of the items on the lists that you made earlier that brought you comfort. Then share these doodles with others. Send a text to an old friend as a reminder and to inspire them to find comfort in similar items in their lives. That is it for this video. If you liked what I shared here, go ahead and leave a comment down below and find ways for us to connect outside of this platform. I have a Discord server that's totally free. We host twice monthly creativity clubs over there, and I would love to meet you at one. Another great place for us to connect is over on SUBSTACK, which is what I use instead of Patreon. Go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this. And until next time, stay creative and find your own ways to persistently bloom.